Have an exec session prior to this meeting to discuss a legal matter. We do not have any public comments, so we'll proceed to the first building and grounds agenda item. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's do the pledge. I forgot.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Also, I want to announce that on July 22nd, Monday, a week ago, we had an informational session with the administration and KCBA architects to learn about the process for renovation or new build of the high school. With that, we will now move to our first and only agenda item for buildings and ground, and that will be the summer project update, which Mrs. James will guide us through.
Good evening. So some of the, we've talked about the summer projects that we've been working on in the past, and I just wanted to give all of you an update on these projects. First of all, at our Roarstown and Mountville Elementary Schools, we had been doing some poured in place for all of the, under all of the playground equipment. That has been completed and is in place. The blacktop around the playgrounds, that is also poured and in place. And the parking lots are getting completed. The blacktop part of it is finished. They're working on some line painting and they'll be working on some line painting on the playgrounds as well. I have some pictures here that you can see. My photography is not near as good as what it looks. So please, if you have a chance, go out and take a look at it. Both of these poured in place areas are massive. And they're going to be awesome for the kids. I think that they're really going to like them. They're really going to enjoy them. But they are massive. We did find when they were tearing up the macadam part of the playground at Roarstown, we did find a leak. This is in the piping, the water piping that gives the water or produces water for the well fields. So that was kind of a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. That was something that we knew was there, just couldn't find where it was. So when they started digging, they uncovered a small hole, which we then proceeded to investigate further and were able to find the leak and get that leak fixed. So that was a good thing. As far as these two projects, or as far as both of these buildings are concerned, we are wrapping up projects in the next week or two. I had a meeting with the contractor yesterday, going over all of the punch list items and coming up with a to-do list for the last minute type items. At this point, it is looking like this project is going to come in under budget. So good thing. We have a few more outstanding things, but it still looks like it's going to come under budget. So that's a good thing. And without too many major issues that we came across, but there's.
Do you have any
updates.
idea how much under budget yet?
If I had to guess, it's probably going to be somewhere between 11 and 12,000.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other project that we have going on right now is the Landisville Middle School and Landisville Primary Center boiler and chiller project. Boilers and chillers are in place and they are working to get the final wiring completed and so forth. At this point, we are hoping to have the startups for both of these buildings, the chillers on the 7th and 8th. So next week, we're hoping to have those done as long as everything goes well between now and then. We did have a few things as far as parts coming in that had set the project back just a little bit here at the end, but we'll get it up and moving.
And that one is also on one budget?
Yes, there hasn't been anything that has caused it to go over budget.
Okay.
That would actually save some on the budget because of not having to do any of the additional work underground, correct?
We saved some, so that was a different budget as far as the oil tanks.
Yep.
But yes, we did save money on that.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, any questions for Mrs. James? All right, I believe we don't have any action items for building and grounds, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Wogelmuth for Finance Committee meeting.
All right, we're going to move into the Finance Committee meeting, and the first thing on the agenda is item 4A, and that's going to be a finance presentation from Mrs. Hall.
Okay, so the board has asked me to provide some information as it relates to our budget relative to staffing and as it also relates to teacher contract negotiations. So I just want to provide a background on our budget and some of the factors that go into that. I will not be talking about negotiation sessions or any of that information, but simply a background information for the board and for anyone who may be tuning in the community. Next slide. So this is a slide you've seen before. It is how our budget breaks out. As you know, over 70% of our budget is salaries and benefits. We have other areas such as tuition, transportation, debt service that we have to also pay for. But the vast majority of our $150 million budget is wages and benefits. Next slide.
What is the
Sure.
slice on the special education? Because that's not salaries and benefits. Is that something in addition?
Sure. That's all the other,
Oh, IU.
well, it's going to be supplies. It's going to be
Programming placements.
placements,
Gotcha. Okay,
everything that's not salary
Thank you.
or tuition.
thank you.
Okay, so breaking it down further, that 70% breaks into 58% base salary, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the annual salaries for employees. 3% is other wages, which contains any extra hours, curriculum writing, overtime, opt-out credit if someone does not take our benefits. And then 39% is benefits. And when I say benefits, I don't just mean health and welfare, the medical, dental, vision. It's also PSERS, Social Security, and things of that nature, workers' comp. So that is a big portion that adds onto our base. And as our base salaries go up, our benefits also increase because PSERS and Social Security is all based on a percentage of wages. Taking just the base wage portion, I wanted to break it out by group. There's often a perception that administration is making all of the wages in a school district's budget. That is not the case here. Almost 80% of our base wages are for our teachers, which is our largest group. You can see at the bottom, it has the number of employees, just to give you an idea of how many people make up each of those. 7% is administration, 12% is support staff, and then a little over 1% is our extracurricular, which is our coaches and advisors for some of our, sports teams, musicals, band, things of that nature. Next. So I talked about the pending HEA contract. So just to give a baseline, we have to look at 23-24 base salary because that is the last salary that was approved because we do not have a contract going into the 24-25 school year. So if you look at that plus the extracurricular, we have to gross all of that up by our PSERS, Social Security, and FICA. Those are the things that are a percentage of wages. So those are real numbers that increase every time the wages increase. So just to give a perspective, a 1% increase on wages for both HEA and extracurricular, as they're both part of the collective bargaining agreement, would equal about a 0.61% tax increase. Now that is going from 23-24 to 24-25 only. As the PSERS rate changes up or down, and as wages compound, that number is going to change. It is most likely going to up. Wages are going to compound, and PSERS rates are projected to go up after this year. So this is another chart that I had presented back during our budget meetings. It's the projected Act 1 index. The base is from the IFO, and I adjusted it based upon the percentage that has typically been our adjusted percentage to give an idea of what it might look like for the next couple years. The 24-25 budget is done. As you recall, we've committed to continuing to put some money into debt service. We picked the $150 million mark, at least for now. So that line there is locked in. We have to do that in order to do our building projects. So if you, for example's sake, would increase the base wages of HEA and extracurricular by 3%, That is what that red number in the yellow box is. That's what you would need. That's just for an increase to those wages. It does not include any other employees or any other expenses that we might have. So if you look at what it would cost to increase it by 3% plus the commitment we have to debt service, you have your subtotal, and then the taxing authority remaining is at the bottom. Now, that percentage, and that's if we increase taxes to the index every year. So that percentage at the bottom has to cover debt service, transportation contract increase, administration, support staff, debt service, increasing costs of supplies, or any other initiatives that we might take on. So it's a tough situation to try to rectify within the Act One index because we are limited with how much we can increase taxes. So anyone have questions on this one before I move on?
Is where do you get the projected, maybe you mentioned that.
I did. So the IFO, the Independent Fiscal Office, puts out a projection for 4 years,
Okay.
and that's the base index. So I know on average what our adjusted index is, how much of a percentage it is. So I adjusted it up. It's an estimate. Like, I don't know for sure that that's what it's going to be, but that is our best guess of what it will look like over the next couple of years.
And that could change.
Oh, it can always change, but that was
What
their
drives
best
that?
guess.
What drives that from the state coming up with that? How do they determine that?
That I have
You
to
know?
get back to you. I actually,
Okay.
I don't want to speak in
Okay.
length on how the IFO does
So
that
we
because I
don't
really don't know.
Okay.
No. I mean, the Act One index is given to us and then they make projections, just so for planning purposes that districts know what it might look like.
I believe it's just a regular formula and each district then has their you have your set.
Right, I'm
Act
talking about
one.
the base. I don't know
Right.
how they're coming up with the base.
I think it's complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it's projecting the future. So it's an imperfect science. We're going to see, in the next couple of years how close they are. But that's the best information that I have to work from.
Because they go from 6.3 down to 3.7. That's a substantial
Well,
drop.
if
So
it-
they're thinking because of all the inflation, it's going to drop back off. Is that kind of?
Presumably, but if you look at our historical index, 6.3 is incredibly high. It has often been far, far lower in the 2s, 3s, and 4s. So 6.3 is an anomaly. We don't expect it to stay there.
See that again.
Yeah, at least that's not what they're projecting. I'm
Okay.
an economist, so I can't tell you exactly why, but we will see. But these are the best numbers we can come
Government's
from.
Coming up with, so
They are. I mean, we don't determine our Act
Yeah,
One index.
understood.
That is, given to us.
thank you.
Sure. So having said all that, we have certain goals for negotiations, right? We want to make sure that our professional staff is, given competitive salary and benefits, that we're providing a safe and healthy work environment for them, that we're providing professional development opportunities, and that we have access to learning tools for both staff and students. So, we have those goals, and that's what we want to be able to do as we negotiate a teacher's contract. So having said that, I've taken a look at what the history has been and where we stand within the county and how our teachers have been compensated over the last 11 years or so. So what we have here is how we rank in the county from 2013 to 2024 on the average salary and the average experience, which is how many years they have in education. So average salary is driven by a couple things. It's driven by experience, and I'll show you salary matrix in a few slides, but it's also driven by experience in education. So how many, what your degree is, how many additional credits, and then how many years you have in. So as you see, we've ranked among the top in the whole 11 years, never gone below 5th in terms of salary. Our experience, we rank much lower. And experience does drive salary. So that just shows you that our salary scale is competitive within the county and our teachers have been paid well on average.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is the average experience, you said it was like years teaching, is that the step?
That's their step, correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's the step they come in on.
It's a step that they're at when the
Okay.
average is done. Yep. So everyone's on, it depends on the district. We have 14 steps. Some districts have 17 steps over 20 some years because they have free steps. It really depends. Every district's a little bit different, but we can only compare upon the educational level, bachelor's, master's plus, and where they are in terms of step. So just to kind of even that out.
Is it fairly accurate to say that the average steps in the county are above 16?
I want to say the average is between 15 and 16.
Okay, thank you.
or 15.5 perhaps. Yeah, next. Another thing I looked at was our historical average salary. We've been low in the experience, but our salary's been high. So what this chart does is take 2013 to 2024 and adds the average salary from left to right. We have led in most of those years, and it cumulatively, we are at the top because we're at the very bottom one, which adds your average salary for that time span. So we have been competitive. Like we showed some years we are one, some were a little bit lower, but overall in that time span, we've been the leader in terms of average salary in the county. Next. So I talked about how salaries are driven by education and years of experience or STEP. So when you look at average salary, it's hard to say one's higher than another because you don't know what the education level is of the complement of teachers and you don't know how much experience they have. Looking at the salary scale gives you more apples to apples. So these are all the salary scales for bachelor's, which is the starting column for anyone who comes in with simply a bachelor's degree. And it'll outline their steps from 1 to however long they go. So I've highlighted Hempfield in yellow. And then Mike, if you go to the right, if you can, I know it's hard to read because it's a lot of information. I've averaged out what it is across the county. This is the 23-24 salary schedules. And then how much we exceed the average in dollars and percentage on each of the steps that we have in our salary scale. So from 1 to 14 for us, because that's as high as we go. So we are well above the average in every one of the steps in the bachelor's column.
So Penn Manor has 31 steps?
Well, so they have, I think they have 17 steps over 31 years. Like you are stuck on step 8, I want to say for like 5 years.
Okay.
Theirs is years of experience, but you stay at the same step. So you'll see the same value repeated for Penn Manor in a number of steps. They don't change every year. So they might not move until, they hit so many like 5-year increments. I can't remember exactly what it is, but if you see where the numbers are the same, it's several columns or several cells.
So that previous graph, I meant to ask you, the previous slide, you're basically taking the average salary for each year and then just adding
Adding it. Yep.
each year.
Yep.
So what it shows is you add all the average salaries, Hempfield's still number 1.
Correct. So that's over time. Like I said, sometimes we were number 1. So for any given year, we might have the biggest piece of that line. Other years we're not, but cumulatively we're ahead.
Okay.
So historically, we're leading the county in terms of average salary.
That's an interesting graph.
And I mean, what is interesting is we don't have the highest level of experience. So we don't necessarily have people all in the top step either.
An average salary is just all the salaries
Just-
divided by the number of people.
Yep, a point in time divided by the FTEs. So not everybody is a 1.0, it might be a 0.5. So they take that into consideration.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is just salaries.
Correct.
And the benefit portion of that plays into this to a degree as well.
It does. So like I said, some of it is driven on salary, that being PSER, Social Security, FICA. Other pieces are done on plan design, what you offer in terms of benefits, your medical insurance, what your copays are, what your deductibles are, all of that is different and it will vary based upon district and how much you pay for that insurance as well. Skip one more, Mike. So another column that everyone has is the master's column, which is the next one on here, just is another illustration of, where Hempfield is compared to the average in the county and how far we are above. So we are consistently, there's no cell where we are below, or it will vary by cell, but we are leading or well ahead of the county. We're not the highest in every one, but we are well above the average. Next. And then the other one, this one's interesting. This is Masters plus 60. For us, that is not our highest column. We have a doctorate column that follows that. But for all the districts that are highlighted in light green, that is their highest. So it's comparing our second to highest column with most districts that are highest column. So our teachers have an opportunity to move beyond that even further. And on the right is where we stand compared to that. Next. So what we really have and what I want to illustrate here is that we have a balancing act. We have consistently had teachers that rank the highest salaries in the county. We strive to uphold a reputation, to be competitive, to be able to attract and retain employees. We want to offer a comprehensive range of benefits, and we want to provide professional development opportunities. On the flip side, we have a limited ability to increase taxes. We are limited by the Act 1 index. We do not determine the PCERS rate. That is dictated upon us, and that is a very significant expense to the district. And then in addition to that, we have many other district expenditures. We are talking about major building repair, renovation, expansion potentially. We have other employees, we have transportation contracts, we have debt service. So we have lots of things to balance all within that Act 1 index chart, which I think just shows it's a matter of trying to balance all of those things within our means. So that was kind of my point of what I'm trying to show is the background from the budget perspective, that we are doing a good job with our teachers based on the research that I've done. And we would like to continue to do that while still being fiscally responsible and being able to meet the needs of everyone, all of our students and our teachers. Other questions?
No
I have
questions?
a question. I have a question. Somebody, if you can hear me.
What's that? Okay. Yes.
Okay. I have two questions, actually. One is, how does our anticipated extra funding, since the state has passed the budget, how and where does that fit in to our formulation? I believe that we're looking at something more than $2 million extra next year than we were anticipating.
Well, so some of it is basic ed funding, which is
Right.
about under 700,000, right? I will say the board is committed to putting that in capital reserve, right from the budgetary process. So that is where that goes. Some of the other pieces are, we have to apply for them, some of the adequacy funding, the PCCD, and those are for very specialized things. So not all of that can't all just be applied to salary. We are limited in what some of those funds can be used for.
And Mrs. Brady, we will provide an update at the August 13th meeting.
the
Some
budget.
information's already been provided in board news. But as we get more information from the state as to how exactly we will be applying or what we can apply for, what does it all really mean? We'll be able to share that with the board in an upcoming meeting.
Okay, and I did have one other question. I'm just trying to look through here. I'm scrolling back through to figure out which slide number it was. I believe it was slide 6.
Okay.
If we
With
can go
the-
back to that. It mentioned just for the 3% base raise only for the 25-26 school year, but I'm wondering the 24-25. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Starting
For
in the
the-
2026.
Starting in the 25-26 school year. So what is happening in the 24-25 school year?
So that budget is already passed. So I didn't want to project out what it would do. Like, we're still in the middle of negotiations and we're not, I don't want to reveal too much or get into those details, but that budget's already done and approved. So I can't do anything about that. I'm really talking about the budgets that we have control over, which are the ones coming up 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8.
Okay, and is that a 3% year over year or 3% spread between those 3 years?
Free every year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Mrs. Hall, I have a quick question here. Just looking at those pay scales, something that's different for these type of contracts is the step increase. What's our normal step increase every year that the teachers are guaranteed? Is it around 5%, something like that?
The step increase as it was in the last contract was a set amount. It's 1510, I want to say. 1500, I think, is the step. But then there's also
For years
so-
of service. For years of service. So like if I have a
Right, that's-
5-year teacher versus a 6-year teacher.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of that.
So if you're a 5-year teacher and a 6-year teacher, you automatically get a raise every year, regardless of what the contract says, because of the step increases.
Correct.
What's
Every
that
year we
then?
have an active contract, yes.
So what's that average? What percentage does that average out to normally?
Oh, that's going to vary because it's going to be a higher percent at the lower steps and a much lower percent at the higher steps. I don't have an average percentage. I can get that for you, but I don't have it because it does vary based upon.
Right. Okay.
1605 is the step differential right now. Sorry, I have the exact number.
And that's on top of any raise that they get in the contract, correct?
Correct. So each year, the step in each salary schedule is 1605, but each year the salary schedules also increase. So you're moving into a new salary schedule, but you're also moving up a step, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It's hard with showing multiple years, but
Any other questions?
I have one more. Just, I think a point of clarification maybe on the steps and the raises. The steps are designed when you're negotiating the contract. That's the raises are being built in as you negotiate the contract for each year of the contract based on each step. It's not as if there's an overall raise plus whatever the new contract steps are.
no,
Correct.
what I'm trying to say, it's the step plus whatever the next year's contract is. So the salary scale does not stay the same from year to year.
Right.
So the bachelor step one, for argument's sake, is 1,000 and the next year is 1,500. The next step is still up, that step increment.
Yeah, but it's
Right, I guess-
every teacher's automatically going to get a raise from year to year as they go up years of service. So it's kind of like a double raise each year between the steps and then whatever percentage increase we get in the overall scale.
Right. Those are the two factors that determine their increase. Correct.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Mrs. Hall, for that presentation. It's always enlightening to see true numbers and data when you're looking at these items. So thank you. And then we're going to move on to finance action, or not action items. We've got one more under contracts. 4B, there's a list of contracts that are here that will be on the board meeting for August 13th for approval. I hope you had time to take a look at them. Does anybody have any questions about these contracts? They will be on the agenda for approval. So if there are concerns about anything, please bring them to light now. And
I do have some questions.
discuss.
I have some questions. I'm looking at 4B on the psychologist contracts. I'm just curious, really, do they bring their own contracts and then they're self-written or written by their own legal team? They seem vastly different in the way they're structured?
So at least for the independent contractors, our solicitor drafted the agreement and we use a standard agreement. Student First, I can't really speak to because I'm not the one working with that vendor, but presumably that's a company.
Correct.
That's going to have their own agreement.
Correct. They would provide it to us because we are seeking their services. And that's the contract that they use when they do their independent evaluations.
Right. No, I was more concerned just about the differences in the two
Yep.
Psychological services. One being, I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say publicly here, but they just seem like their pay structuring is very different from one another.
Yep. So typically when individuals from a contractor standpoint, depending on their skill set and depending on what we need, you will find that others, their prices are higher, some are lower. It all depends on just the specific services that we are seeking.
And it's generally been vetted that they are typical and we feel comfortable
Yes.
that those are okay, thank you.
Yep. We typically work with individuals over a period of years if it's all been going well in the past.
Is it accurate to say that we have our legal review any contracts that come to us, such as this?
If it's something that we have concerns about and or if it would have been like the first time years ago that we weren't comfortable with, then we would go and seek that legal review, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions about these contracts? All right, hearing none, we're going to move on to item 5, which is finance action items. And there's action items that for approval A through E. We can take them all together. So I'm going to need a motion for approval in a second, and then we can discuss. Thank you, Mr. Donato.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on these items?
Can I just ask a question on the contracts under the finance items? The one for barn burners, I guess it mentioned that, we're also covering the cost of additional liability insurance there. Is that come under our umbrella policy, or are we paying extra additionally for that?
No, that comes under our umbrella policy, and we
Okay.
provide a certificate of insurance for any facility that we are running outside of our, our district.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And just checking too that our kids that are using that facility are at all times supervised by Hempfield staff.
Yes.
Okay. And does anybody else there in the facility, are they required to have background checks or any of those kind of things if they're in,
They are with our
Commun-
students at that time, yes, but typically
Okay.
at that, we are using it as just our staff.
our staff? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, we'll take a vote. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
All right, I think that's 8-0. If I have my 7-0 in favor. Any opposed? None. Okay, thank you. Motion passes. And then the last on the list, we have an upcoming schedule of meetings. And you can see here, our next meeting is August 27th for Buildings and Grounds and Finance combined. And if there's nothing else, I'll just need a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
In favor.
Any opposed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries 7-0. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.